Hi, and welcome to Three Questions with my friend Jennie with us from Simply Good Law. Good morning, Jennie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning. How are you this morning?
Just living the dream, my friend. So, Jennie, I got a couple questions I want you to help me with today. So, the first one comes around business formation. I find that people just don't consider liability when they pick a business formation. Whether it's, I'm just going to be a DBA because that's easy. Well, I know I want to be partners with Jennie, not understanding the liability that that partnership may create. It's important to talk to you before you decide so you understand the risk.
It's absolutely important, Kevin. You bring up a very good point. A lot of people decide, well, I've been living for a while with this work that I'm doing. I'm not so happy, and I have a dream of running my own business. So they decide, hey, today is the day. I'm going to make my dream come true, and I'm going to run my own business. And I think maybe I'll do a partnership or a DBA or a LLC. They're not really sure. So what they should do, the first thing they should do is put together a business plan. That's not required by the law, but I suggest it because it will help them map out where they want to be a few years from now, as well as address what type of structural business entity they should be. And they should come to me that's the very first step. Some people don't, and we can fix it, but it's much better to get it right the first time rather than go back and try and fix it with the Secretary of State's office. Because whatever you decide to do, you're going to have to determine, well, is it just going to be a sole proprietor? Are you going to have a partnership? Are you going to have shareholders? That's all something to keep in mind when you decide what the business entity will be. So what I suggest is people who want to start their business come to me and we'll discuss that. From there on, we can determine what the correct filing is. For example, LLCs seem to be pretty popular now, and everyone says to me when they come, I want to be an LLC. Well, there's certain questions I want to ask you to see if it's actually going to fit your business. And if it makes sense now, is it going to make sense 2-3 years down the line?
I guess, but I kind of chuckle because I have a lot of friends at LLC, but they just like the way it sounds. Company LLC, it sounds good and stuff. So, one other thing I want to talk to you about today is employment law. I have to admit, Jennie, I've worked at some companies who just didn't have employment policies, and it was just random of what would happen. So you and I could make the exact same mistake within the same week and get treated differently. Kev, we all love Jennie. She's awesome, so we just, Jennie, don't do that again. We don't like Kevin, so we want to write him up and maybe fire him. Can't do that, right?
No, absolutely you can't do that, Kevin. You bring up a very, very good point. One of the things that I do for small businesses is I ensure all defenses are up to thwart any potential future lawsuits. And part of that is an employee handbook that's written. That will address how people are treated. Everyone needs to be treated the same across the line, regardless of whether they like them, they think they're cool, or they can't stand them and they think they're awful. You have to treat everyone equitably. And the employee handbook will set that out because it will say, well, for instance, if there is some type of harassment or anti-discrimination, how should we treat that? The handbook states every single step, what needs to be done in investigation, what happens during an investigation, how long the investigation should take place. And you actually mentioned about terminating people. There will be a written policy in regards to termination. Most people probably are aware in Massachusetts, we have an employee at will, which means that you can be terminated without cause unless you have a written contract. But that there's a big caveat there. In other words, if it's an illegal termination, then you actually have a suit there. So in other words, it would set out in the employee handbook what actually are causes for termination. And if the employer fails to follow that, then the employee actually has a wonderful case. Well, it's written here in black and white. I didn't commit any of these so-called, crimes or situations or scenarios. So why am I being terminated? It also works very well for the employer because the employer can use that as a defense. Well, hey, you were terminated because XYZ. Here it says right here, if you do this, you're going to be terminated. That's why we terminated you. So it works for both parties and it's a safety for both parties.
That makes sense, because again, I've just seen all sorts of things like that. And really, it's important that you follow the policy, because I worked in a company, we actually did all of that.
Yeah.
And then we'd still kind of lean towards, we like them, we don't. And I would always be, stop. What does the policy say? That's all that matters. Doesn't matter if I like them, don't like them. You got to follow the policy if you got one, right?
Absolutely, Kevin. You bring up a great point. If you hire me to write an employee handbook and then you just leave it or you give it to all the employees and you're like, here, read it. That's not good enough. You've got to train, review, and train. You have to have all the employees come together. I know it takes time, but it's well worth the time. Sit down, go over all the policies with everyone. Once everyone has acknowledged that they understand it, of course, you ask them, do you have any questions? You answer all their questions, and then you ask them to sign off and date that they acknowledge that they've received it, they've been trained on it, they understand it. You take that piece of paper, you put that in their HR file, okay? So that covers the employer that they've been trained, and you make sure you train all levels of management. And every single year, you should update the employee handbook because there's different laws that change. For example, when COVID came, nobody had COVID policy in their employee handbook. They didn't know what to do. So I've updated employers' handbooks with the COVID policy, and I've done a general pandemic, epidemic type of policy to cover anything like that in the future. So yeah, you can't just have a handbook and say, oh, it's there. You have to actually put it into use.
So let's flip it over. What if I'm an employee and I feel I've been wrongfully terminated? Should I reach out to you?
Definitely. You reach out to me and we could have a short conversation and we can see if there's something that I can do for you. If you have been wrongfully terminated, I can let you know what the law in Massachusetts is. And if there's something that I can do for you, I'll do my best for you. If not, I'll give you another attorney just so that you could get a second opinion. It's always good to get a second opinion. Just like when you go to the doctor, you get a second opinion.
So Jenny, what's the best way for people to reach out to you? How can they learn more, my friend?
They can learn more at my website, simplygoodlaw.com, or they can follow me at Simply Good Law on Facebook, or they can follow me on LinkedIn at Jennie Tannenbaum.
Jenny, I really appreciate you taking a couple minutes out of your day to come on the show. And as always, thanks for being my friend.
Thank you. It was fun, Kevin.